Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Careers in the Arts webinar organized by Florida Alliance for Arts Education. Uh, my name is Marko Sulejic, and I am an associate professor and associate director here at Digital Worlds Institute at University of Florida. Today, I'll be talking about creative careers in the gaming industry. So in the gaming industry, it's a relatively young industry, so not a lot of people had opportunity to train specifically to get jobs in the gaming industry. As a matter of fact, the kinds of degrees that allow for training for this particular jobs have started to appear only about maybe 10, maybe 15 years ago in the extreme cases. Next slide. So as I illustrate by this slide, quite often, and this is not just in the gaming industry, but quite often what we need may not be exactly what students learn in the school. And in gaming industry, I feel that that's even more extreme, where often the types of knowledge that that we are requiring our employees do not come directly from school. So it's very important for us that as an industry, we collaborate with academia and we communicate the types of core knowledges that we need, but also the type of self-learning knowledges that we need. Next slide. So here we have a word cloud. A word cloud is illustration of a particular text that would count how many times a particular word would appear in a text, and if those words that appear a lot of times would be presented very large, and the words that are not very common in a text would be presented with smaller font. So here what I did, I took a large number of job ads for video gaming industry, and I ran an algorithm that analyzed and counted all different words to give me the understanding of, and it's an insight into what type of skills are the most in demand, right? So as you can see here, being creative is very important. Potentially the only word that it might be more important is to be adaptive, to be able to adapt. And this is, I cannot underline how important this is. In the gaming industry, things change very, very fast. And if you're not nimble, if you're not able to adapt, if you're not able to learn new skills, your studio will die, or you will, on your own, just lose your job. So being able to learn new skills is very, very important. Obviously, information literacy, problem solving, communication, so on and so forth. So again, all these skills that are very much in demand are not specific skills. Nobody here is talking about Photoshop, or nobody's talking about Unity 3D video gaming engine. They're very much skills that would allow you to learn all these different things based on the specific needs of the studio that you would be working for. Next slide. So here is another way of presenting some of the skills that are often required by gaming studios. So what are the 21st century skills that our students need in order to be successful in the gaming industry? So it kind of, as a web moves from the center towards the out, right? So managing online self, process and tool aware, work with collaborators and teammates, being self-directed learners. These things are incredibly important. So I just want to touch on a couple of them, right? Being self-directed learners. What that means is that I, as a manager, so in my particular case, aside from being associate director here at Digital Worlds Institute, I also own a video game company called O2D, Organic to Digital. So I need the people that I work with to be able to understand what is it that they need to learn next. because most of my employees have better knowledge in a specific area that they are working in than I do. So my programmer probably knows programming better than I do, even though my undergrad is computer science and my graduate is Masters of Fine Art. So I do have insight into the both creative and technical world, but somebody who is hands-on creating in a game engine, we use specifically Unity 3D, probably knows it better than I do. What that also means is that if there is a new or better way to do something, to animate something, to create some type of a physics engine or interaction, that person, that developer needs to be able to discover that on their own, and they also need to go out, be proactive, and actually do it. Because I don't know that. I will not be able to know every single nuance. So that's really, really, really important. Work with collaborators and teammates. I can tell you that it is not uncommon that we would hire somebody who may not have the best portfolio or the best CV. Because at the end of the day, what we're choosing somebody who has a certain knowledge, but also to have somebody who has a certain attitude. And attitudes go far. In the video gaming industry, it's not uncommon that you will work 60-hour weeks. We have a game that is going live this weekend, and it's beyond that. You know, people are spending 12, 15-hour days to finish up and wrap up all the work. When the pressure is so high, it's incredibly important who is on your team, who will show up, who will stay long, who will stay calm and not go crazy if something goes wrong, right? So often I can recognize somebody and say, hey, you know, I want to work with this person. I'll teach them the skills that they don't know. But I cannot teach somebody to be a team player. It just doesn't happen. So especially not when they're 35. When they're younger, yes. So work towards being a team player, being a good collaborator, and quite often you may get jobs ahead of somebody who has better skill set. Do manage your online self, which means that tomorrow when you go get your job, people will Google you and they will see, have you contributed any reviews to any video game journals? Have you, do you have a blog? More and more people would look at your Facebook account and see if, what kind of person you are. So just realize that your online self is your representation towards the world. You know, that's who you are in a way. So take conscious effort to manage who you are online. I will not go through all of them, but this is being recorded, so you can go through it at a later date. All very, very, very important skills. Next slide, please. So next I would like to talk a little bit about numbers, some facts. I think these are really important, some important data, so you get an understanding of, okay, so how much would I make if I do this? How much would I make if I go to New York versus San Francisco? Or which college should I go to? Which studio should I go to? So on and so forth. This map here shows the size of the circle represents the intensity or the highest concentration of activities in video games. The blue ones are top colleges and purple ones are top studios. As you can see, they don't always overlap, but there is a tendency for most of the activity in the video games industry to happen on the West Coast, particularly in California, and in Northeast. So here in Florida, we're not necessarily the hotbed of video game development activity. And it's something that is being worked on a lot, and more and more studios are being attracted to all three areas, kind of South, Central, and North Florida, being Miami and Orlando area, and here in Gainesville, where I am talking from. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about salaries. Salaries vary by region and obviously by discipline. So as you can see here, the most common jobs in the video game industry are programmers, you know, people who program the actual game, who develop it, artists and animators who draw and create everything that we experience on a visual level. Game designers actually are people who come up with what game is going to be about. So they rarely actually design in terms of visual design. Game designer means coming up with a story. It's equivalent to somebody who runs a screenplay or who comes up with a story for a movie. So a game designer will design different levels, come up with what happens with different characters, all the interactions, so on and so forth. And producers, managers basically in every company. So as you can see, the highest paid function here is a programmer. It's also probably the hardest one to obtain a degree in. It is very demanding and very hard. I actually am programmer by my undergraduate degree. And it is an incredible, I'll talk a little bit more about each job title, so give you a better insight into who does what kind of on a daily basis. Also, important thing to look at here is that West has the highest salaries. So does East here meaning Northeast. But please also be aware that the same regions have much higher cost of living. So if we look at here some averages for South, let's say the programmer makes 78,000 and some change, and in West they'll make 101,000. So that's not really a huge difference. I mean, it is, but not incredibly huge, maybe 20–25%. However, the cost of living between South and West, especially if we're talking about San Francisco, the difference might be 300%. So don't let these numbers fool you necessarily. Make sure that you take everything in context. In the table underneath that, we have the same thing, just now separated by kind of a junior, mid, and senior. And as you can see here, the numbers used are the junior less than 3 years, mid is kind of 3 to 5, 6 years, and seniors will be more than 6 years. So all of the jobs on their senior level make more than $100,000, which is great news. However, if you look at the junior levels, only programmers, kind of jump up out of the average of 50-something. Programmers are in incredible demand and relatively low supply. One of the reasons why it's the job that gets the most foreign visas, foreign workers to come in and work as programmers. Many of those so-called H-1 visas, which are work visas, are issued to many Eastern European, Chinese, and Indian nationals where the education system is very strong and people want to come and work as programmers because, again, it's a high demand, low supply situation, unlike for the other three, which are a little bit more evenly spread between low supply and demand. Next slide, please. Here's a list of some of the top studios, and it's interesting to just look at it and see when are they formed, what were their recent titles, and again, where is the location. So as you can see, California, Oregon, California has probably half of the studios in top 10, and that's in a way to be expected, and then few other studios kind of dotted here and there. Next slide. Top colleges. Here's a list of top colleges, both for undergraduate and graduate. And here, there are some things that are kind of odd in a way. For example, if you look at the #1 undergraduate college for game design, it's University of Utah in Salt Lake City, which does not necessarily have a huge gaming industry, but early on they recognized this opportunity and they specialized in the video game design and programming. So by now they had a huge head start, and in that sense they are kind of ahead of a pack in a way and having a very good and strong program. I'll let you look at through this on your own. On my part, I am talking from University of Florida, from Digital World Institute, which is a very, very young institute. We actually just accepted our very first generation of undergraduate students. And video game design and programming is actually one of our core tracks. So again, many universities are now getting into the game, and many of these programs might be just as good, if not better, than some of the programs listed here. However, it's a huge difference when somebody has a program for the last 10 years versus somebody who just starts now and starts making their way up to the top 10 list. And I think that this, because of that, this top college top 10 will change drastically in the coming years as more very powerful, very strong academic institutions join the fray, so to say, and introduce their own programs in video game design and development. Next slide, please. This is just a resource that I used in order to give you some of the data. Big Fish is the publisher that my company collaborates with, so you have the URLs of where some of this data is coming from. Next slide, please. Now I would like to talk about several jobs that are most common for people to get into out of college or high school, for those who do not go to college. The most common one is a game tester. You do quality assurance. This is really among the most popular ways to break into the industry. It just looks like a really fun thing, right? You just go to a job and you work. Your job is to play games all day long. It's not necessarily always like that. Next slide, please. So quite often what happens when you're a game tester, you don't go in and play all kinds of games that you really like all day long with your friends. No, you play one game, which is the one that is about to be published, and you may or may not like that particular game at all. You don't play it for fun. You actually have to play it extremely systematically, and when you find a problem or an error or bug, as it will be called in the industry, you need to log it. Once you log it, you need to play it again and recreate it. Recreate the same bug to ensure that you know how to communicate what just happened to the programmer, right? Once you do that, the bug goes to the producer. Producer recreates it himself or herself and then passes it on to developers or programmers. Programmer then fixes it, marks it fixed, goes back to the producer, he or she checks it, gives it to the tester, you have to double check it again, and then bug is fixed. And then you go on. Usually you will find several hundreds, if not more, bugs in a particular game, and you will play the same game for, let's say, 2-3 months. So it's not always as glorious as it sounds, but it is really a good way to break into the industry, as if you do have additional skills and you show as a good team player, you might get hired as a designer, a programmer, or some other role. Next slide. Art and animation. This is probably the hardest area to break into, mostly because the supply is very high. A lot of people want to be artists, and demand is not that high. There's no need for that many artists on every game. Obviously, there is a lot of artists working on video games, but it is not something that is in short supply. So in order to be an artist or an animator, A, you have to be really good, and B, you have to be very, very dedicated. So when you finish college, it's just not enough to say, oh, I have a bachelor's in digital arts and sciences. You have to have a really good portfolio, and you have to network, and you have to make connections, and you may need to go and intern somewhere for a couple of months, all just in order to get your foot in the door. That said, once you're in, and if you do a good job, usually you can kind of ride that wave and move from one game to another, and it's actually an amazingly creative and fun job to have. Next slide, please. We talked about programming a little bit. Again, it is by far the highest paid position. but it's not for everybody. Programming is extremely, extremely hard. And the programmers have a very high burnout rate. What I mean by that is there's only so long that a human being can work under pressure. Only so long that one can work 60-hour weeks and do that over and over and over and over again without going crazy. So programmers have a tendency to last 5 to 10 years and then to move on to somewhat of a semi-managerial roles. The only people that I feel last long in programming are those who know how to pace themselves, make sure that they stay healthy, they stay sane, literally, and they do well over the long periods of time. Programming is also the kind of job that probably gives you the best job security of all of them. So if you're looking for job security and you feel like you have the go-to attitude necessary to get a degree and get a job in it, go be a programmer, and you will really not be unemployed for longer than 15 days ever in your life. There's always a need for a programmer. You will be choosing who do you want to work with the most, not can you get a job. So again, it's a high step to kind of, take in your way up, but if you do it, if you have what it takes, it's an amazing job to have for a life. Next slide, please. Journalism is not necessarily the core job in gaming, but there are people who specialize in writing about video games only. Again, not a short supply of those people. A lot of people want to write about games, so quite often the pay is not the best unless you end up being one of the top journalists on the market. Next slide. Design is quite a bit what I do. What it means, it's I'm a creative director in my company. I'm a creative director and a producer in a way. And what we do, we come up with look and feel of the game, with the game mechanics, with what happens on which level, so on and so forth. It's incredibly creative position that requires you to constantly update your knowledge, to constantly learn more things, to constantly play other games so you understand what kind of interactions are being in, so to say, at that particular year, and to keep in mind that whatever you're playing today has been designed a year or 2 years ago, which means that when I'm thinking of my game, I have to make something better and newer because my game is going to come out a year later than the game that I'm playing at that very moment. I would say that this is probably the hardest position to get. In my company, I have 10 developers and 7 designers and 7 artists and only 1 designer. So the demand is so low that you have to be incredibly good at what you do in order to get a job thinking about, thinking up the games, so to say. Next slide. Composer sound engineer. It's a job that for smaller studios, often it's a freelancing job, and it's more and more becoming something that gets lumped up into a single job profession, where we used to work often with a composer and separately from sound engineer. But more and more companies want people to be able to do both, unless we're talking about very large studios that hire extremely popular, well-known composers, and then they will have a small army of sound engineers working on the game. But for most of the smaller and mid-sized studios, this is the one and the same person. So you're going to have this multiple talented personality where you can come up with the music, but also be willing and capable of adding audio throughout the whole game. Next slide. Producer is somebody who is responsible for just about everything that happens in the company. I have this little illustration, mostly just to kind of show you how crazy and hectic an average day is for a manager. And to make it, there's a paradox about it, is that quite often the rest of the team, programmers and artists who actually kind of create something specific each day and go home knowing what they did, perceive producers as like, well, I have no idea what they were doing. They're just kind of here and talking, but I don't know what they do, because at the end of the day, what they do is not necessarily specific of, oh, look at this picture or this many lines of code. They just make sure, and I say just, they make sure that everything runs very smoothly. So their lives are very chaotic, and in order to be a producer, one has to be very, very organized and very, very proactive. You have to kind of seek out the opportunities and ways how to make order out of chaos. Next slide. This is my last line, and I just wanted to illustrate the framework for the 21st century learning. And as you can see here, most of the things that people are looking at is, the specific skills I'll teach you once you come to my company. But what I really need is somebody who is aware, who knows what's going on, and most importantly, who knows how to learn. If you know how to learn, I'll teach you the specific software that I need. But if you don't know how to learn, and you do know the specific software, you become almost useless, because the reality changes so fast that it's almost impossible to teach you all the skills that you will need in 5 years. I don't even know what type of softwares and what type of engines will be happening in 5 years. So the best as I can do as an educator is to teach you some of the skills that are being used now, but most importantly, teach you how to discover what you do need to learn to become more capable next year, and how to go about learning it. So at this moment, I would like to ask everybody for any questions that you may have. There is, on your GoToWebinar control panel, there is an area for questions. So I would like to take any questions that you may have for me at this moment. All right. So I would like to thank everybody for participating in this webinar. I would like to thank Florida Department of Education. I would like to thank Florida Alliance for Arts Education for organizing it, and Digital Worlds Institute, who is hosting my particular webinar on my end. Once again, thank you very much, and I wish you all lots of luck in your future careers in gaming industry. Thank you.